Hello, welcome to another episode of Executive Suite. I'm your host, Thomas Braun, and today we have with us the CEO and co-founder of Equivesto, Alexander Morsink. And Equivesto's one of the top crowdfunding platforms in Canada. And I want to ask Alexander about some of the insights he has into running a successful crowdfunding campaign. So, Alexander, can you please first give us a brief introduction to your platform, and then we'll jump into some of the things that CEO founders need to pay attention to if they're going to go raising money on a platform like Equivesto.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me. In terms of Equivesto and what it is and how we got here, Equivesto is a Canadian investment platform. We're licensed as something called an exempt market dealer. We're licensed in all 13 provinces and territories across Canada. We use that license essentially to facilitate investment through our online portal. So we help private companies make themselves available for investment from Canadian investors, both high net worth individuals, but also the general public across Canada. Equity crowdfunding is one set of rules that we use to make that possible. But as an exempt market dealer, we use a variety of different prospectus exemptions to help companies raise capital.
Okay. So maybe what we can do is try and explain to the viewers what those different kinds of fundraisers would be. So which ones fall into the crowdfunding basket and which ones fall into the exempt market dealer basket?
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, anytime a company is raising capital and you're not going public via an IPO and raising money in the stock market, you're essentially raising money in the exempt market. The background behind that is when you go public, you create a prospectus. And if you raise money privately, you are raising money exempt from the requirement to issue a prospectus. So it's called the exempt market. Essentially, the securities regulators in Canada have a variety of different prospectus exemptions, different rules that allow private companies to raise capital without the need to go public and issue a prospectus. One of those exemptions is the startup crowdfunding exemption, which everybody generally refers to as equity crowdfunding. That is National Instrument 45110 startup crowdfunding. There's the legal text for everyone. So equity crowdfunding is one of those doorways that you can use to raise capital. There are a number of other doorways. Even if you are raising money on your own directly from friends and family, you are still, of course, following Canadian securities law and using one of those doorways, one of those exemptions from the prospectus requirement. So rather than going through all of the exemptions and helping everybody go to sleep whenever they're listening to this podcast, essentially, other than equity crowdfunding, there are a few other options that allow you to go out to the general public. But as a startup founder, you most likely will be making use of the private issuer exemption, which lets you raise capital from friends and family, business associates, and accredited investors without you having to do any filing or communication with the government until you have 50 shareholders. Or you're using the friends and family exemption, which of course lets you raise capital from friends and family, or the accredited investor exemption, which lets you raise from accredited investors. Now, just quickly, accredited investor means an individual with an income over 200,000 or over 300,000 combined with a spouse, or an individual with 1 million in net financial assets, excluding real estate, or 5 million in net worth, including real estate and other asset classes. So as a startup founder, you're probably raising from friends and family, raising from angel investors, that type of thing. So you're already using some of those laws that exist. So as an exempt market dealer, we can help you use those laws in a more efficient way, but we can also help you access some of the other laws that we'll talk about more in a second.
Right. With crowdfunding, there are limits to how much money people can invest. And if you wanted to just go straight to accredited investors like high net worth individuals who are going to invest $50,000 or $100,000, then you would be relying on that exempt market pathway. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, so the Canadian space is slightly confusing. My firm is an exempt market dealer, so that allows us to help private companies raise capital using any of the different exemptions. Now, in the Canadian securities law, there is another way that a company could help startups raise capital using the crowdfunding exemption without that platform having to get further licensed. So basically, in Canada, the government has created a two-tier system. One tier where there is a platform that's only licensed to do equity crowdfunding, and a second tier operated by exempt market dealers that can use the equity crowdfunding exemption, but also all of the other exemptions. And so I'll get into some of the nuances sort of between the two. But as a founder, if you're thinking about doing equity crowdfunding in Canada, you want to make sure you know which of the two types of platforms you're speaking to and the benefits and drawbacks of each. The platform that's only licensed to do equity crowdfunding is essentially limited to, as obviously I've said, only using the equity crowdfunding set of rules. Now, what does that actually mean? Through the equity crowdfunding rules, a company is allowed to raise up to 1.5 million Canadian dollars every rolling 12 months from investors residing in Canada. Also, investors investing using that set of rules are allowed to invest up to $10,000 per person per campaign. So what that means is, with that set of rules, you as the company can only raise up to 1.5 million through that platform. And every investor, no matter their personal situation, whether they're friends and family, whether they're a billionaire, whether they're your neighbor, doesn't matter, they're limited to a maximum investment of $10,000. Now, if we flip to the other side, where there's an exempt market dealer making use of the equity crowdfunding exemption, as an exempt market dealer, you can basically pick and choose between the exemptions you're using based on the investor and the deal and what sort of makes sense. So what that ends up translating into is, if you, a startup founder, are raising an equity crowdfunding round via an exempt market dealer, you will, of course, use the equity crowdfunding exemption, letting you raise up to 1.5 million through that sort of legal doorway. But the EMD would probably use at the same time the accredited investor doorway, the friends and family doorway, meaning high net worth investors who want to invest more than that $10,000 limit they could invest much more than $10,000. Also, because they're coming through the accredited investor doorway, not the equity crowdfunding doorway, they wouldn't be using up that annual $1.5 million limit that you as an issuer would have. The same goes with the friends and family exemption doorway. So by working with an exempt market dealer, you can do the equity crowdfunding, but you could also do the other exemptions at the same time. So you're able to raise more capital, even more than just the 1.5 million. You're just limited to the general public still with those $10,000 per person limits, and the general public not investing more than the 1.5 million. Another important difference that's critical to highlight is actually when it comes to the way investors can access your offering. So an exempt market dealer is required to do a full suitability and eligibility assessment on every single investor who signs up and creates an account with them. As part of that, we create individualized investment limits for that unique investor. And we have to ensure the investor only invests within those personalized limits. So let's say a member of the general public signs up, they want to invest in your deal, they go through the suitability and answer all the forms and the questions. We may determine that that person shouldn't invest more than $5,000 into your deal, even though the rules allow somebody up to a potential maximum of 10 from the general public. Whereas conversely, the equity crowdfunding portal alone, that's not an exempt market dealer, does not provide any form of financial advice or suitability assessment on the investor. So any person who's signing up through the platform could do the potential maximum of 10,000, is not really monitored or controlled by that platform. So if you go with an equity crowdfunding portal only, that's not an EMD, you can't use any of the other exemptions to raise money. You could only raise the 1.5, but you're able to potentially get the maximum of $10,000 per person per deal per year. Whereas if you're going with an exempt market dealer, we're able to use many more exemptions. And so you can potentially raise more than the 1.5, but every single investor has to go through that suitability assessment. So we may be providing limits below that $10,000 per person per year limit.
Okay. Now, you doing both at the same time, or do you have to choose one or the other?
So as a company that wants to do an equity crowdfunding campaign, you are only able to do one equity crowdfunding campaign on one portal with one sort of EMD or
Hmm.
portal at a time. So you can't be on two portals at the same time or anything like that. You can be on one portal, stop your campaign, and then go to another portal and then raise again on that other portal. That's totally fine,
Yeah. No,
but you can't be on both.
what I meant was that if I'm on Equivesto and I'm doing a crowdfunding,
Right.
can I at the same time also take money from somebody who wants to invest $100,000?
Yes, absolutely. So that's the real benefit of working with an exempt market dealer. So exempt market dealers are able to use all of the exemptions and basically use them at the same time. So it's essentially a layered campaign. So the investor signs up, they get approved based on their category, and then they're directed the right investment documentation and the right process based on whether they're okay, friends and family, they go this way. Accredited investor, they go this way. Equity crowdfunding, they go this way. So from the outward perspective, your campaign, everybody's adding to the same campaign. You're seeing the dollars move up, but actually in the background, each of them are moving through a different set of securities rules.
Right. So one of the things I noticed on Equivesto was that you've got some real estate deals on there and
Mhm.
they seem to be raising a lot of money. So they seem to be the most successful. Now, I'm just wondering if you can explain that to us. I'm guessing that those people are actually relying on the exempt market dealer basket because some of them say the minimum investment's $100,000.
Correct. Yeah. So, as an exempt market dealer, one of the tools available to us is equity crowdfunding, but there are 12 other exemptions in Ontario alone that we have available and we can use to help clients raise capital. So, in terms of deal volume and transaction volume, equity crowdfunding probably represents about 5% of our annual transaction volume on Equivesto. We certainly use it frequently with many different issuers as a useful tool, but it's one of many sort of tools in the tool belt. So, what most of the larger issuers are using is a different exempt a prospectus exemption, which would be the offering memorandum exemption. So, the equity crowdfunding exemption is kind of the simplified, less expensive, smaller capital raise way that a company can go out to the general public. The much more robust manner for a company to go out to the general public would be via the offering memorandum exemption. And this is basically halfway between being a private company and the full responsibility of being a public company. So, what do I mean by that? To use the offering memorandum exemption, you need to provide annual audited financial statements on an ongoing basis for as long as you have money from those investors. You also have to provide annual reporting to the regulator, including those financial statements. In addition to that, when you're raising capital, you need to prepare a document called the offering memorandum. So with equity crowdfunding, you are preparing a document as well. That's called the offering document. That's about 20 pages. It's much shorter. It's sort of a simplified list of everything an investor might need to know about investing in you. And the legal cost of preparing that is much smaller. It's sort of, 5, 7,000. Usually the platform will assist you with preparing parts of it. The offering memorandum document is entirely different. It's over 100 pages long typically, and it's not prepared by the platform at all. That document, just paying a securities lawyer to prepare it, will typically cost anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 just for the document. So it's much, much more expensive when you add in the audited financial statements on an ongoing basis, on and on, to the cost compared to the equity crowdfunding. However, the amount of money you can raise is without limit. So you could raise $1 trillion through the offering memorandum exemption if you wanted. You could have literally 1 million shareholders in your business through the offering memorandum exemption. Furthermore, the amount of money that the general public can invest is also increased. So with equity crowdfunding, you're only able to do $10,000 as a member of the general population, and then you have to be an accredited investor. With the offering memorandum exemption, you're able to do $10,000 as a member of the general public, or you can also get qualified as a sort of intermediary investor between general population and accredited investor, which is called the eligible investor exemption. So eligible investors, which is individuals with 75,000 in annual income or 125,000 combined with spouse or 400,000 in net financial assets. Those individuals are able to invest up to $100,000 per year into offerings under the OM exemption. So you're able to get more capital from, some potential investors in the general public. So you're really able to, raise, 100 million, 150 million. So many of our clients that are private funds and things like that, they are going and raising through the offering memorandum exemption. So they're not doing, equity crowdfunding at all. They're using this other set of rules, and that's enabling them to raise, upwards of $50 million.
And how are those people marketing their real estate investments? How are they getting a hold of these $100,000 investors? Because clearly they're not just happening to see it on Equivesto and investing. So they're independently marketing this to people and then just using the platform to essentially process the paperwork.
It,
Can you explain how these real estate funds are bringing in all of this money, and how are they marketing to their investors? Because I don't think that they're getting people who are just randomly stopping by the Equivesto website. So how does that work?
Absolutely. Great question. So, as an exempt market dealer, we can use a number of different prospectus exemptions for capital raising. And many of those larger funds are using the offering memorandum exemption. So, that exemption is sort of the older brother, perhaps we'd call it, the older sibling of the equity crowdfunding exemption. So, equity crowdfunding allows you to, raise 1.5 million from the general public, no audited financial statements. Investors can do the maximum of 10,000 per deal. With the offering memorandum, it's much more extensive. You're doing audited financial statements, you're doing annual reporting to the regulators. The documentation you have to prepare, the offering memorandum itself is, over, 100 pages plus long. Typically is going to cost you 50 to $100,000 in legal fees to a securities lawyer to have that prepared. But as a result, you can raise any amount of money. You could raise $1 trillion through the offering memorandum exemption. You can have as many shareholders as you like, and the individual investors can actually invest more. So the general public can still only do to $10,000 in a year, but there's a new category called the eligible investor, which is 75,000 in annual income or 400,000 in net financial assets, and they can do up to 100,000 per year. So by using the offering memorandum exemption, you can unlock a lot more money across sort of the whole country. Furthermore, all of this additional reporting and documentation can make accredited investors feel more comfortable in participating. It's essentially like a halfway step between being a fully private company and going public and being listed on the stock market. Now, the OM exemption lets you raise more money, but either equity crowdfunding or the offering memorandum, it's possible for you as the issuer in a compliant way to go out and notify your broader community and network to the fact that you're raising capital. So it's important to note as well, industry-wide, a lot of platforms will typically refer to the size of their community or network in an attempt to, get companies to come and work with them. What we've seen in reality is typically it's actually the founder, the founding team, and their personal extended network and the network around the company that makes up sort of 70 to 90% of the capital raised during these types of raises. There's not often a ton of investment coming from a supposed network around the platform. For that reason, Equivesto tries to be very transparent upfront. So we don't represent that we're bringing any investors to your offering. We are a processing and a compliance portal where it becomes legal for you to raise capital in this way, allow the general public to participate, and go out and notify your community. Now, let's talk about this notifying for a moment. So, before, when you're raising capital on your own, you're not allowed to publicly communicate about your raise really in any way. And that's essentially because nobody has verified anything you're saying. People don't know what's true or not true. And the regulators want to protect, the ecosystem and the market from too much sort of communication. By working with an exempt market dealer, we are doing, of course, due diligence into your offering, but also we're doing compliance and verification of any marketing materials that you want to make available. Because we're doing that, that then unlocks the ability for you to notify your community with social media posts, ads, billboard advertisement, TV advertisement, all sorts of different things, a newsletter, whatever kind of you'd like to do to expand the awareness around your business and what you're doing. Now, there's all sorts of rules about how you can do this, what you can and cannot say. The key thing is what you're not doing is soliciting. This is not solicitation. You're notifying people about your business and the fact, that you are operating and you're potentially available in this sort of manner, but you're not actively soliciting anyone. If people do want to get more information, that's when they would come to the platform. And that's where, as a licensed entity, we're then able to solicit somebody to make an investment. So that's an important delineation that you're not soliciting anybody, you're notifying them. But by working with a licensed entity, you can notify in a compliant way much more broadly.
Okay. So to summarize that, the listed company, the company that's raising money in your platform,
Mhm.
shows you the ads before they post them, and
Correct.
you make whatever changes need to be made, and then they can go ahead with it. And that would include emails, like if they had a list of all of their followers or what have you,
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
an email list, a video script, the copy and images of any sort of ads or anything like that. We would be reviewing and approving all of those materials in advance before they're going out.
Right. And so one of the things I'd like to add, just to sort of summarize what you've been saying so far to people, is that later on, if you're going to do a merger, an acquisition, an IPO, sell the company, at that point in time, somebody's going to do a bunch of due diligence on your company. And one of the things they do is they go right back to the inception of the company and they look at every single stock issuance that you've made, and you have to explain what prospectus exemption you were relying on when you made that. So a lot of people, they just think, oh, friends and family, I'll just say everybody's my friend. Well, then they say, okay, well, how long have you known that person? How have you known them? Where did you meet them? Who introduced you? And have you ever done business with them before? Have you ever sold them an investment before? You get all these questions. And so, if your goal as a founder is, well, one day I want to go public on the NASDAQ, or I want to sell my company to a bigger company or a PE fund, that can really be a spoiler for you, because if the law firm that's doing the due diligence finds out that you've actually somehow violated securities laws, that can kind of screw things up for you. And depending on the jurisdiction you're in, there may not be a fix. The BC Corporate Act has a section in it that allows you to go to court and get a court order, essentially ratifying whatever you did wrong. Basically
Hmm.
saying, well, yeah, you made a mistake, but that's okay. I'm going to give you a court order declaring that you're good to go. The other jurisdictions don't have that.
Yeah, I was going to
So if
say, I
you're
don't think
like,
Ontario has that.
if you're from Ontario or you're a federal government, you make a federal corporation, I should say, and you make a mistake, you're kind of stuck with it. I don't even know what you're supposed to do then. So,
I think, and I can tell you from a securities law perspective, if you took an investment from someone you shouldn't have, the only remedy is to unwind the investment as if it never happened. So you
yeah,
give the
which could,
investor the money back,
yeah,
but also if you grew your company considerably since then and they should have made a lot of money, you
right.
take away any of those returns that the investor would have made.
Yeah, which is not going to work. They will sue you for
Yeah, the
sure.
investor will sue you for
So,
sure.
and it doesn't actually cure the breach of the law
Yeah,
either,
you would
really. Like,
essentially, well,
I don't
and
know
that's
what
where
you
you'd
do.
have to speak with the regulator. But certainly when the regulator comes across these with some
Yeah.
frequency, they
Hmm.
essentially their remedy is always to unwind
Is
any
it?
transaction. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, let's get back to listing on Equivesto. If somebody wants to raise money and like, I'm just wondering, you were talking about having to raise money from your own contacts. What kind of insights can you share with us for people to lay the groundwork and prepare for that? If you're thinking that this is something you want to do, you can't just necessarily jump into it if you're not prepared. What can you do to prepare?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll say there's a lot of things you can do to prepare. We have a bunch of information actually on that in our learning center at equivesto.com/learn. But essentially, you want to be focused on kind of building the basis of that network from the beginning. So, what I'd recommend is starting to do essentially a newsletter, an investor newsletter, where you give an update sort of on what you've been doing, what the company's been up to, every quarter or something like that. And then anytime you speak to somebody who's interested or sort of in the network, wants to stay involved or keep aware of what your company's doing, you add them to that newsletter. Another thing to think about, a lot of people think equity crowdfunding is different and distinct from potentially doing an angel round. Most successful equity crowdfunding rounds are essentially in combination with a friends and family round and an angel round, all of those happening at once. And the equity crowdfunding rules just let you really expand that network when you're doing that round. So typically, we would be having companies gathering and preparing a list of potential angel investors that they'd like to reach out to and contact, as well as a list of potential friends and family that they'd like to have come and participate. Most companies will prepare at least 100 names, sometimes as many as 200 names from that personal network as the sort of basis of the raise. People who you know are going to come in early on at the beginning of the campaign, demonstrate a lot of traction, and then go from there. The next thing that I would recommend doing is really building the sort of extended network around your business. So this is looking at who are your customers, who are your suppliers, who are your sort of people that you're interacting with in the community. Does your business have a social media presence? Are you posting? Are you creating educational content about your industry and your space? Are you building that network of individuals? Now, if you're like a winery or a brewery, that becomes very simple because you have customers, they're coming all the time. You're building that network automatically. If you're doing, a deep tech startup, that might be much more challenging. But really, you're trying to build that multi-level network and that community around the business. When it comes to your actual campaign and the timing and the flow, initially, the first group of people coming in to invest will need to be either those immediate core friends and family that know you and are going to fund either way, and or going to be some anchor angel investors, people who know the business, have done their own due diligence, and are interested in really helping fund you. That creates a strong framework. From there, that's when you start slowly pitching outwards and outwards in the network. You don't want to start your campaign trying to do, Facebook ads out to people who've only been to your website one time. They get to the offering page. You've only raised $500 out of your target of $1 million. You've ruined that one attempt to get in their community and convince them to participate. You want to make sure by the time any one person is getting to your offering page, dependent on how far away that relationship is from you, that person lands on a campaign page where there's enough, traction on the campaign and communication and success already built in to your raise that they then feel comfortable enough to participate on their own. So somebody who's only met you once should only be landing on your campaign page when you've already blown past your minimum goal, you're 300% funded, and you're on your way to $1 million or $1.5 million. Having your aunt land on the page, maybe when you're at 20 or 25%, and you've already got your sort of core group in there, but you're clearly building traction. She's not, the first $500 in the door. Maybe you've already got 50 or 100,000 raised on the campaign. And when you're leveraging any sort of marketing or paid advertising, you're not using that to source new people. That's a waste of dollars, especially as a startup founder. You're probably trying to be very tight and very efficient with how you're spending your money. You're only looking to deploy marketing dollars essentially as a retargeting. So you've done your own outreach, your networking and everything to get people into your orbit. You're doing that yourself as the leadership team, things like that, going on other people's podcasts, whatever you can think of to do that. The paid marketing is so when somebody does come to your company's website or come to the offering page or something like that, they are then being reminded and shown about your company all the time. So it feels like you're everywhere and your company is much bigger than it is, more successful than it is yet. So that becomes a critical step. You're not saying, I'm going to spend $20,000 on Facebook ads and magically find this whole community who will come and fund me. That it almost never happens. If you are deploying money towards paid ads, it's only as a boosting effect to really bring people back into the community that you've already attracted. So if I was to create a playbook from the beginning, which of course we have and we provide to our issuers, you want to be building that sort of organic community basis 6, 12, 18 months in advance of when you plan to launch your campaign. You want to be growing and building that network around your company, around your personal brand, everything like that. You want to start a newsletter, providing updates on the business, keeping people informed. And you want to start making your list of 100 or 200 names that you personally think would come and invest if you reached out to them directly. And then as you start getting closer to the campaign launch, that's when you start ramping up your materials. You would create a specific coming soon page about the raise itself, making it clear that you're considering doing something like this. And then that's when you're getting, by this point, maybe you have 10 or 15,000 people on your newsletter. Now you're asking your newsletter if any of them would be interested in joining your coming soon page about the investment opportunity into you. And then you're slowly tracking that. You're building that coming soon page. You still have your list of those 200 names. And then you're actually looking at launching your campaign. Maybe you're going to do a soft launch for 1 or 2 weeks before the more public launch, where those 200 names can come in. They can do some initial investment. You're lining up pitches to angel networks around your city, your state, province, region to try to get even more network and everything involved. You want to be in a position where by the time your campaign is soft launching, you have a bunch of these things lined up. So you've got your immediately family and friends, your 200 people coming in, funding you as part of that soft launch. You've got 1 or 2 lead angels coming in. So by the time the page becomes publicly visible, you're already, 100, 150,000. Then you're doing webinars, you're doing Zooms, you're being sort of more public there. You're reaching out to that coming soon list that you've prepared saying, hey, campaign is now live. They're getting there. You're already basically at your minimum goal. You're over 100,000. They're now getting involved. You're doing email retargeting to those individuals to get them participating. Then you have your scheduled pitches with the angel networks. So if somebody from the angel network is coming and looking, wow, you've already raised 250,000. You have perks. So if somebody's investing 10 or 20,000, it makes sense for an angel to kind of get involved at that check size. So you've got that going on. And this is when you start to do the retargeting ads. So people who are coming to your page, but they're sort of hearing about it as a secondary or tertiary level, they're getting the retargeting that's bringing them back. It's asking them to join your newsletter, getting involved, staying in the company ecosystem. And you're just sort of building on that as you move through the campaign timeline. Hopefully
Okay.
that's detailed enough.
Yeah. So these are then the retargeting, just for people who might be a little bit confused about that. That's if somebody's visited your website, for example,
Right.
there'll be a cookie or a pixel, I think is what Meta calls them, and then your ads will essentially only appear to those people. So you're not paying to advertise to random people who probably have no interest and will just skip your ad.
Exactly.
So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. When
Um,
you go to Amazon and you click on a vacuum and you've already bought the vacuum, but now all you see are vacuum ads, it's that.
yeah,
You want to do that, except people haven't bought the vacuum yet. So you're like,
right,
you should come buy a vacuum.
right. So yeah, and that works. I think we've seen that with a lot of things where you just look at something and then you
Then
might
it's
just be,
everywhere.
and then, yeah, and then all of a sudden see ads on the side of your computer screen. So that sounds good. Now, I think I just want to know before we wrap this up, what are some of the costs involved for a company that is interested in doing a crowdfunding?
Absolutely. So we'll talk first about the sort of the hard costs, the mandatory costs first, and then we'll talk about the variability of some other costs. So in terms of the costs from the platform itself, so on Equivesto, there's an upfront application fee of $5,000 Canadian plus HST. We then also take a percentage of your raise as a success fee. If you're raising from the general public through equity crowdfunding, we take 7% of the raise amount. If you're raising at the same time from accredited investors and they're investing over 10,000, we take 1.5%. of their investment. So those are the fees from the platform. We don't have any other fees. With an equity crowdfunding round, we also recommend that you seek legal counsel, specifically a securities lawyer. In that situation, you probably want to budget between 5 and 10,000 for the lawyer. The lawyer is going to help you with three core things. The first is reviewing the structure and the preparation of your company. As part of the due diligence, we will go through all that, but there may be some areas that need to be improved or beefed up prior to your raise, including potentially creating new non-voting common shares, amending your shareholders agreement, things like that. The second area the lawyer is going to help you is with reviewing and helping you finalize the offering document. We, as the platform, will assist you with about 80%. You will do 10, and your securities lawyer will do 10 plus a full review of the entire document. That document is legally binding, and it's your document as the company. You are personally certifying it. So having a lawyer review and approve that is very important. The final area the lawyer will assist is with the closing and the filing. After equity crowdfunding, you have 30 days to do a one-time filing called the report of exempt distribution. So this filing, the lawyer will assist you with reviewing and preparing. So that's usually 5 to 10,000 for that. Now, in terms of some of the other costs, of course, marketing. We've mentioned marketing. That is really quite variable. If you have marketing individuals on your team, you have graphic designers, you have social media professionals who have some experience, you've been marketing your business already, they can probably do a lot of the work prepping and setting up a campaign. And so you're only going to be spending additional dollars on any sort of ad retargeting or anything like that. Now, if you don't have a team around you, you can try to do it yourself. You're probably going to be creating somewhere between 50 and 200 social media posts over the life of the campaign, pre-campaign, during, and post, as well as hundreds of emails, sort of in email drip sequence and things like that. So it can be quite extensive, the amount of work, if you're really trying to build this sort of fulsome marketing approach. Now, if you're really focused on essentially doing an angel round plus the sort of family and friends, and you're just extending that a little bit, and you're not trying to get this huge sort of marketing engine running, then you could do it with zero marketing spend. And you're just doing a lot of sort of manual grunt work to reach out to people, message people on LinkedIn and stuff. So marketing is really variable. And it really depends on who your target investor is, how strong your network is, and the amount that you're trying to do a really sort of full scale campaign.
Okay. So I think that that should make it simple for people. And Equivesto sets up the campaign page itself. So the company could have a pitch deck. They could have a like a 2-minute corporate video, something like that, to help
Absolutely. We
spruce
definitely
that up.
recommend including a pitch video as well on the offering page. You can do sort of just piece the camera like this. You can do a fully, professionally designed and shot video. It's really depending on your budget.
Okay. And do you need to have audited financial statements just for the crowdfunding?
For crowdfunding, you don't need financial statements of any kind, not even internally prepared. So you
Okay,
don't
that's
need
good to
any
know.
financial statements just for crowdfunding. For some of the
Mhm.
other ones, you will need different levels of financial statements.
Okay. So I think we've pretty much covered most of the topics. I can't think of too much else to go over, except I guess Equivesto itself. When I was looking online, I could only actually find, I think, two active crowdfunding platforms in Canada. Was I missing something? There were quite a few that started up that have since discontinued,
Mhm.
or they've sort of paused with no indication when they will restart.
Right. I can't really, I know certainly of Equivesto and of Front Funder,
Mhm.
us
Mhm.
being the sort of the two largest.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know, as you said, there were some others. I'm not sure of their current status at any one given moment, but it is a bit of a challenging environment for platforms. So we certainly welcome any others that are looking to launch. But yes, it can be challenging.
Yeah, I think there have been people who have tried to launch things that were specialized just in mining or a certain industry, and there just wasn't enough volume for them, I guess,
Mhm.
to continue. So when the Canadian Securities Commissions decided they were going to allow crowdfunding, I think there were about a dozen entrepreneurs who rushed in thinking that they were going to start this.
Mm.
And I think it's just pretty much Equivesto and Front Fund are the only ones that are left standing. So what did you do that those other people didn't do?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult question. I wish I had sort of more information or more details sort of about what that is. I think we've tried to be very transparent about the fact that we are here as a sort of compliance partner, as a technology
Mhm.
partner, as a licensed partner, rather than a source of the investors. We try to be very transparent on that, so people don't come in with different expectations, and we think that's certainly helped us in the market. But it's always kind of hard to tell with those kind of things. But I certainly want to thank you for having me on the show. It's been great being here, and hopefully I've been able to share some information that people find helpful.
Yeah, it's been great. And congratulations on your success. I think it looks like you're doing well. Especially some of those real estate deals have been raising a lot of money.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, and everyone who's been watching, thank you very much for watching. If you like this kind of content, think about liking and subscribing so that you can find out more about things like crowdfunding and issues of interest to CEO founders. I'll see you later. Bye for now.
Bye.